Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Day one of our Texas Tour 2.0 is officially in the books. The first stop on our journey was the IREN facility at Childress, and in today's podcast, we're going to be walking you through exactly what we saw during that visit. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below what you think of today's video and if you're currently an IREN shareholder. With that being said, let's get into today's podcast. All right, guys, away we go. Day one of our Texas tour is officially in the books. The first stop on our road trip was Childress, Texas. Now, you and I have never been to this location, Anthony. We really got to see some countryside on the drive up there. We got ourselves a rental car. First stop, Childress. I wanted to ask your impression before we talk about the IREN facility itself. I wanted to get your initial impression on the community and the involvement that IREN really brings to this location.
Yeah, I mean, Childress itself isn't a very large place. There's not many two options for dining there, as we found out. However, people were very friendly there. People at the hotel were giving us some advice on what to do and what not to do. When we actually got to the site, we asked the question about, employing local people, and they said most of the operational staff on the site are local people. Some of the more technical managerial posts have been brought in from other locations, and actually, interestingly enough, quite a significant amount of people have been brought down from British Columbia to carry on that experience they did in putting the facilities up there at the Prince George site. So using that expertise to drive what they're doing down in Childress. And again, it's like, as we saw over the last 2 years, as they grew their hash rate, these buildings are literally rinse and repeat. They're literally going up quickly, and we'll see from some of the photographs already what Horizon One looks like from the exterior. Obviously, we won't be showing any photographs internally, not at this moment in time, and probably never in the future. That's not for public information. But you can see the exterior of the buildings and also the exterior of the buildings for the mining as well. And the first thing that I saw when we were driving down the track to the iron facility, the sheer size of this facility. The pictures that we see on the presentations, they're not doing it any justice, really. This is probably the biggest site I've been to, and I've been to quite a few now. We were at the Corsicana site last year, which is a 400 megawatt facility, at the moment operating with another 600 megawatts to operate. But this facility is a 750 megawatt facility with 500 megawatts already operating. And now they're finishing the buildings now for Horizon 1 and 2. This is a sheer scale. I wouldn't like to walk around the site. It's significant length. We'll show you some photographs to try and highlight how the buildings look like. And you can sort of start to see the curvature of the earth alongside that, Bryce.
You certainly can. Yeah, I actually ran into a few of the staff that are working at the facility in the town of Childress, and you can really tell what this type of operation does for the local community, whether you're talking about the hotels, the restaurants, the staff, really uplifts and supports the local community itself. We'll talk about that a little bit more as it relates to water as well in a second. So we got in our car, we drove from the Welcome to Childress sign into the IREN Childress facility. As you can see, just pure amazement, really, the size, the scale, the number of people, the number of trucks, the operation they had here is really a sight to be seen. Now, our first stop was the head office. We needed to check in, do our orientation. We got our safety equipment. We got our boots on there, a nice little photo with the team in front of the IREN flags and facility map there. Our first stop was actually to take a look at some of the power infrastructure and the utilities or substation that are in place. Now, one thing unique with Childress that I didn't realize is their proximity to one of these large solar farms. And this actually feeds into the grid. All of IREN sites are grid connected, which gives you that certainty of power. We'll talk about some of the backup power generation as well. But in terms of the electrical infrastructure here, Anthony, this again, a scale that I really haven't seen before.
Yeah, this is big scale. And Giles Walsh, the vice president operations, he was kindly in charge of the tour itself. He's actually built the site. He's led the build on that site from day one. He's an Aussie himself, but he's moved with his family to the local area. So he's put all his heart into that development there, and you can see from the sheer size of it, the power itself. 750 megawatts. Um, that's going to give them a significant amount of power towards their new strategy, the CSP strategy of delivering that high performance compute with their latest client, Microsoft. And the feeling is if they continue and build out Horizon 3 to 10, that will be sufficient to manage the power on the site without having to increase anything more than they've got at the moment.
Yeah, now we talked about the SB6 ruling. This is obviously something a lot of people have talked about in relation to IREN, talking about prioritizing the grid backlog in ERCOT. We got some great insight into that as well from Asher on our last podcast. But in terms of the power infrastructure itself, 345 kilovolt lines coming into the facility. We even got to ask about some of these long lead items that you can see in the substation itself. Now, after the substation stop, we went over to the Bitcoin mining operations, and this is where it really got interesting. You can see in the picture you just mentioned, Anthony, essentially the curvature of the earth. There's so many of these buildings. They're broken down into three sections each, separated by two firewalls. Now, we were able to go inside the Bitcoin mining, get some video, get some footage, as you can see on screen here. We've been to a few of these mines before. So in terms of the Bitcoin mining facilities and building, these are air-cooled facilities. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience here and how this compared to maybe some of the other Bitcoin mining infrastructure that you've seen?
Yeah, so we had a look in one of the facilities, and bear in mind there is, I think, 27 of these buildings all in a row now. So significant amounts of these buildings there delivering 40 exahash on the site itself. That's probably the largest concentration of Bitcoin mining production on one site, pretty much anywhere in the world, without understanding if anything's going on in the likes of Russia or China at the moment. But certainly in the Western world, nothing can compete with the size of hash rate on this particular site here. Going through the facility itself, very, very clean, very, very, and the first thing I noticed, it wasn't as loud as I'd experienced in other facilities. Maybe some of the technology they're using here is able to sort of like dissipate some of the noise itself, but the sheer size doesn't do it justice. Going through into each part of the building, and there's firewalls separating the buildings there to make sure if there is an issue, it doesn't affect the whole area. And bear in mind, all these machines in the buildings, they're all part of the grid, and every machine can be accessed remotely with the software. If it's not operating at the same level, repairs can be done very, very quickly. So every machine is independent of each other in terms of the fact they can highlight when a machine is not operating at its full capacity. They have a facility on site where they can repair their own machines. 27 technicians working in there. So a significant size, that's bigger than the repair shops I've seen at other facilities there. But remember, this is the biggest mining site, so it needs a big facility, a lot of technicians in there. And this happens at all sites. The machines are working 365 days, 24 hours a day. There are going to be problems with those machines, for the fact they're working round the clock. And so, we were at a facility last year, and they'd had 10,000 more tickets for work on machines in the first 6 months in a 150 megawatt facility. This is 510 megawatts. So you can just imagine how many machines might need. It could be a repair that takes 30 seconds. It could be a repair that takes 5 minutes. It could be a repair that takes a little bit longer. But they have 27 technicians on the site just to manage that. And the other thing that was noticeable is just the length of the building, going from building to building. Just in one of those buildings that you can see from the air shot there, as I say, it's a number of football pitches long. So just to give you a sort of like trying to highlight the sheer size of the building.
Yeah, I said in my Twitter post, you really need to see it to believe it. We were inside here. We thought the entire building was the first section of the firewall. Lo and behold, there was three of these. What really struck me was how clean these facilities were. These are top-notch construction. Again, we've been to a number of these data centers. Giles actually made a point to show us some of the dust on the machines, non-existent. They have cleaners go through there on a weekly basis. They've got their filters being replaced every 3 months. We talked about some of the dust impacts along with airflow, and it really does seem like IREN's got a strong hold on their Bitcoin mining operations, obviously based on their production, their efficiency, and their fleet size. We can see that in their numbers as well. Now, after the Bitcoin mining, we made our way over to the Horizon facility. Now, before we went into the actual data centers, we wanted to take a look at the water and the cooling system itself. So this really gives some scale or scope to where this money's going. We talk about how expensive on a per megawatt basis some of this HPC AI construction is, in excess of $10, $12 million per megawatt. But you really need to think of some of the ancillary support, including the coolant system, the water required to do that. So you can see by the scale of the water tank on the facility here, no problem for the team at IREN. This is a closed loop facility, meaning once it's set up and functional, the water or the coolant will be recycled through the system. For me, Anthony, this is something I hadn't even factored in to the data center or AI build myself.
Yeah, not at all. And they do have a well on site that can deliver, water for usage, but also they ship water in, as you say, on this closed loop on circuit. So all the time there'll be tankers coming through water to keep the cooling systems, at the right level. And that's something I never even factored in there. I mean, we've looked at sites there that, Jason will say at Corsicana, we've got the water there available. You have to factor that in. It's a key component of delivering these types of strategies. But that's what you have to do. And it surprised me, but obviously it works. And just to put an emphasis on the site itself, the amount of vehicles on that site in terms of lorries, cars, there's over, I don't know, 500 or 600 staff on the site working at the same time. But it looked like a small town to look at the amount of traffic. Everything's driven at a very slow rate, to avoid any accidents like that. But the sheer amount of lorries we saw just driving around on our visit there, there's things moving around. It reminded me of sort of like a large airport where you have the logistics moving things and pieces around all the airport, and that's the sort of like that tries to give it some texture there. A seriously, large facility with a lot of moving parts, and safety is paramount.
Yeah, I was going to say safety is top of the priority. We talked about some of the family rules in our initial briefing, and you can see they do everything to an extremely professional level here. Now, another question or focal point we talked about is obviously this recently signed Microsoft deal. This is a 5-year deal. Now, you and I have talked about, I guess, the concerns or questions about the valuation of the GPUs after that 5-year period. But after talking to Mike Power and the team, we really got some new perspective here. So these buildings, the infrastructure, the water, the cooling systems, the backup generators, these are expected to have a 20+ year life. So although the GPUs may depreciate, may need upgrading or retrofitting after that initial 5-year contract, the way the team was looking at this is they're getting infrastructure that's going to prepare IREN for decades to come, not to mention getting their foot in the door with one of the largest companies in the world and all of the financing benefits that go along with that.
Yeah, this will certainly help in the future costing. So, there might be some small amount of capital required to fit. If you're in 5 years' time, I would imagine we're using more efficient GPUs. So the configuration of those might be slightly different. But these buildings are built to make sure that they can accommodate change, and that was very clear to us. And so, by not having to pay that infrastructure cost on a more regular basis, if the infrastructure can last over 20 years, that's a real saving. The buildings themselves will be depreciated at a minimum of 20 years, which suggests they've probably got a longer life than that. But you're quite right. The 5 years is a good guide there, and it'll be a case of rinse and repeat those contracts. And who's to know? I mean, when Microsoft are on a site there, from my perspective, are they going to want any other clients on site, Bryce?
Yeah, that's a good question. And our initial expectation would be they'll likely grow into this site. We've talked about many of these upsized deals. The initial due diligence, as we've talked about with Patrick Fleury at TerraWolf or Adam Sullivan with CoreWeave, these are months long process, 5, 6 months of discussion. But once you've got that connection, that trust, that understanding, really makes the discussion, the upsize or the extension of these agreements much easier for both sides. Now, you talk about how the fact this was essentially a small city. We walked by some of the mess halls, 300-person tents that are essentially set up to feed the workforce here. We were fortunate. They were actually lifting in some of the larger backup generation with cranes on site as well. The sheer amount of activity here, again, really something I don't think a lot of people fully comprehend by the pictures or satellite pictures that we see maybe on X.
No, you're quite right. And one thing that stood out there, we got to meet, say hello, shake hands with many of the workers there because surprising to me, many of the workers there actually watch the podcast. And so that was an eye-opener. I mean, I expected maybe some of the management teams who have watched a couple of the podcasts, especially the ones that we do with Dan and some of the ones that we highlight and update with IREN. But we met many followers yesterday, coming up, shaking hands, asking for pictures, and really showing a support of what we're doing on the channel there, which is refreshing to see. It's great to see that, and it was a thoroughly enjoyable visit.
Yeah, you're right there. And I'm glad you brought up the staff. We were able to shake hands, meet a ton of the local expertise. You mentioned they brought in some of the top level talent from BC. Now, one of the competitive advantages that IREN has is they've been actually operating GPUs up here in Canada for quite some time. So they've got experience. They've brought some of these people in. They talked about the fact that as you have more experience building these buildings, repeating the process, learning as you go, that's really what's allowed IREN to reach those efficiency levels in terms of construction timeline and quality or caliber of construction. One of the main things that stood with me is the differences in data centers. We talk about the fact not all megawatts are created equal. When you look at the caliber and quality of these builds, you can see that IREN is really going for that absolute top tier quality. They also discussed extensively how they're future proofing or building these facilities for the next iterations of GPUs, whether that's additional cooling pipes that need to be filled up down the road, whether it's rack density. You can see IREN's got that long-term vision, the technical expertise to execute, and really supports what we're seeing in share price, the excitement from the investment community about this story.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey, and one of the first things I thought about when I arrived at the site there is thinking about when Dan and Will first started the company, and probably those early photographs of them being at Childress before anything was done, and looking at the site now, and they must be feeling proud of what they've accomplished with their team and company there. And it is really it's an amazing feat, and it's been done very very quickly. And we asked about have you with being able to sort of like continue to build these similar structures, what was the learning curve like? And they were saying like to build out some of these buildings initially was like 12 weeks, but by the time they finished it was down to 8 weeks. And that saving of time there is not only saving obviously salaries in terms of it's taking less to build the site, but you're able to operate the sites earlier as well. So you're actually achieving revenue quicker than your planned expectation because of that learning curve. So this is something they're going to do with Horizon 1 and 2. And if that's successful and they're able to attract further power towards HPC, then Horizon 3 to 10, as you can see in their latest presentation, will overtake the whole of the site. And the buildings they have in place at the moment that are used for mining, those can be very, very quickly reconfigured and and not a case of knocking them down and restarting again. They can be reconfigured for the HPC strategy.
You're certainly right there. Now, the other piece we wanted to address, interview with IREN. We were supposed to host Kent yesterday. Now, once we got to the site, they said, "Hey, you guys are fortunate. You're probably going to be on your first and last visit to these Horizon buildings once Microsoft gets in there." No GPUs were on site yet, but obviously very controlled, high security around this level of infrastructure. So we decided to take the opportunity to really embrace the site. That being said, we have postponed the interview till later this week or potentially early next week. We did want to give you guys an update on that, but as you say, Anthony, when you have the opportunity to see this stuff in real life, you've got to seize that opportunity. And hopefully the photos, the videos throughout this presentation really help you guys understand the scale, the scope, the quality, the expertise that IREN's put into this facility.
Absolutely. I'm going to say it was an awesome visit. We were extremely welcomed onto the site from the minute we arrived there. Even the security man was waiting for us to turn up. And he seemed pleased to see us as well. So all the way through, I cannot fault anything. Such a great visit and one I'll remember for a long time. And if the opportunity arises to visit later again when more things are complete, hopefully take up that opportunity. But as you say, Bryce, once the GPUs are in there, there's going to be very little opportunity to visit that site. So we're very, very fortunate. And hopefully we've given you guys out there, watching the podcast, an insight as to how things really are there. I mean, it's great when you look at photographs, but they're not doing any justice to actually being there and seeing things firsthand and how big these facilities are in comparison to what you're looking at from a presentation pack.
You're certainly right. So that's our first stop, guys. We have four more on the way. We're going to jump into the car, head off on a 5-hour road trip down to Granbury now. So we wanted to jump on here, give you guys some insight. Obviously, we'll start to include more of these videos and images in subsequent podcasts. But thank you once again to the entire IREN team, a phenomenal group of individuals, and a truly impressive site to see. Thank you so much for watching. You guys, if you have questions about the tour, about any of the images, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Hit the like button if you're an IREN shareholder, and feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here shortly.